I was walking out of the courthouse after filing a police report about my ex-boyfriend when a man in a dark suit and sunglasses approached me in the parking lot. "Ms. Harper, I'm Marcus. I'll be your security detail starting today. Mr. Brennan has assigned me to ensure your safety given the situation you're dealing with." I stopped walking and stared at him, confused and alarmed. I don't know who Mr. Brennan is, and I definitely didn't ask for security. I don't need protection from anyone. I can handle my own situation. The man, Marcus, didn't seem surprised by my response at all, like he'd been expecting me to say exactly that. "Mr. Brennan anticipated you'd say that. He asked me to tell you it's too late. The protection has already been assigned and fully paid for. He's very concerned about your safety, given what he knows about the situation with your ex-boyfriend. He doesn't want to see you get hurt." My stomach dropped and I felt suddenly cold, despite the warm afternoon. How does this Mr. Brennan know about my ex? How does he even know my name? I've never heard of him. Marcus handed me a heavy cream-colored business card with embossed lettering. "Mr. Brennan will explain everything when you meet. He'd like to have dinner with you this evening if you're available to discuss the security arrangements. For now, I'll just be following at a comfortable distance to make sure you get home safely and that no one bothers you." Then Marcus walked away before I could argue or ask more questions or tell him to leave me alone, and I watched him get into a black sedan parked 3 spaces away from where I was standing. My name is Sophie Harper. I'm 29 years old, work as a freelance journalist covering social justice issues, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of how a wealthy stranger inserted himself into my life, claiming he wanted to protect me from my dangerous ex-boyfriend. How that protection became comprehensive surveillance and control disguised as concern for my well-being, and how I almost lost my autonomy and my sense of self completely before I realized that the person supposedly keeping me safe was actually the biggest threat to my freedom and my future. It started 2 weeks earlier when I'd finally gotten the courage to leave my ex-boyfriend, Tyler Morrison, and to report him to the police for the escalating abuse I'd endured during our 2-year relationship that had gotten progressively worse over time. Tyler was volatile and controlling and unpredictable, someone whose anger could explode over absolutely nothing, who'd put his hands on me more times than I wanted to count or admit to myself, who'd threatened me and my family, and even himself, whenever I'd mentioned the possibility of leaving. I'd stayed far longer than I should have, far longer than I'd ever imagined I would stay in an abusive relationship, because I was genuinely scared of what Tyler would do if I tried to leave, scared he'd follow through on his increasingly specific threats to hurt me, or hurt my family, or hurt himself, and make it my fault. But after the last incident 2 weeks ago, when he'd shoved me into a wall hard enough to leave dark bruises on my shoulder and arm and to make me hit my head on the corner of a picture frame, I knew I had to get out before something even worse happened, before the violence escalated to a point where I might not survive it. I'd waited until Tyler left for his shift at the warehouse where he worked, packed 2 bags with essentials and important documents and things I couldn't replace, and I left our apartment without leaving a note or any indication of where I was going. I went directly to stay with my friend Lauren Chen, who lived across town in a neighborhood Tyler didn't know about and who'd been begging me for months to leave Tyler and offering me her spare room. Then the next day, I went to the police station and filed a formal report, providing photos of bruises from this incident and from previous ones I documented, screenshots of threatening text messages, and a detailed written account of the pattern of abuse over the 2 years we'd been together. The detective I spoke with, a middle-aged woman named Detective Sarah Mills, who seemed genuinely sympathetic and concerned, was honest with me about what to expect from the system. "We can file this report and you can request a restraining order, which I strongly recommend you do, but I need to be realistic with you about what that means. A restraining order is a piece of paper. It's a legal document that says he's not allowed to contact you or come near you, but it doesn't physically stop someone who's determined to violate it. You should stay somewhere your ex doesn't know about, change your daily routine and patterns, be extremely careful about your movements and who knows where you are. If he violates the restraining order by contacting you or approaching you, call 911 immediately and we'll arrest him. But prevention is better than response. Stay safe and stay hidden." It wasn't the most reassuring advice I'd ever received, but it was honest and practical, and I appreciated that she wasn't sugarcoating the reality of how limited the protection system could actually be. I filed for the restraining order that same day, and the hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, I was trying to rebuild some semblance of a life while looking over my shoulder constantly, terrified that Tyler would somehow find me and make good on the threats he'd been making for months about what he'd do if I ever tried to leave him. That's the context and the situation when Marcus approached me outside the courthouse after that initial filing. A complete stranger who somehow knew intimate personal details about my situation, and who'd apparently been assigned to protect me by another stranger named Mr. Brennan, who I'd never heard of and certainly never asked for help from. I got the business card Marcus had given me out of my pocket once I was safely in my car with the doors locked. It was heavy, expensive cardstock with elegant embossed lettering. James Brennan, with a phone number and an address for what looked like a corporate office in the nicest building downtown. No job title, no company name, just the name and contact information, which somehow made it feel more ominous and mysterious. I asked Lauren about James Brennan that evening while we were making dinner in her small kitchen, and she immediately pulled up information on her laptop. "Oh wow," Lauren said after a few minutes of searching, her eyes wide as she read from what appeared to be a Forbes profile article. "James Brennan is one of the wealthiest men in the entire state. He made his initial fortune in tech startups in his 20s and then diversified into real estate and private equity. He's known for being extremely reclusive and private, almost no photos of him online, and for his extensive security operations. It says here he owns a private security firm that handles executive protection for high-profile clients and also does contract work for government agencies and law enforcement. This is a serious person. Why would someone like that be interested in your situation?" "I have absolutely no idea," I said, feeling increasingly uneasy. "I've never met him, I've never had any contact with him. I don't understand how he even knows about my situation with Tyler, or why he'd care enough to assign security to me." "That's really creepy, Sophie," Lauren said with concern in her voice. "This could be some kind of scam or identity theft setup or something even worse. You should be very careful about meeting with this guy. Promise me you won't go alone anywhere with him." But the business card looked completely legitimate, and Marcus had seemed professional and competent, not threatening or sketchy. And I was curious enough about how this James Brennan knew about me and why he was offering help that I decided to at least meet with him in a public place and hear what he had to say. I called the number on the business card the next morning, and a woman with a professional, pleasant voice answered immediately. "Mr. Brennan's office, how may I help you?" "My name is Sophie Harper. I'd like to speak with James Brennan. He's expecting my call, I think." "One moment, please, Miss Harper." After a brief hold with classical music playing, a man's voice came on the line, deep and authoritative and confident in a way that suggested he was used to being listened to and obeyed. "Miss Harper, thank you so much for calling. I'm James Brennan. I apologize for the unusual and probably alarming approach yesterday with Marcus, but I wanted to make sure you had professional protection in place as quickly as possible given the circumstances. I appreciate your concern, but I have to say I don't understand why you're involved in my personal situation at all. How do you even know about my ex-boyfriend?" "I make it my business to know about potential threats and dangerous situations in my city," James said smoothly. "I have extensive connections with local law enforcement, and when I heard about your case through those connections, I felt compelled to help. Domestic violence situations like yours can escalate very quickly and unpredictably, and you deserve to feel safe during this difficult time." "But you don't know me," I said. "We've never met. Why would you assign expensive professional security to a complete stranger?" "Let's just say I have deeply personal reasons for wanting to help women who are in dangerous domestic situations like yours. I lost someone very close to me to domestic violence years ago, and I've made it my mission since then to help prevent other tragedies when I can. I'd really like to meet with you in person to discuss the security arrangements in detail. Are you available for dinner this evening at my office?" Against what probably should have been my better judgment, I agreed to meet him that evening.
Lauren offered to come with me, but I told her I'd be fine, that I was meeting him at his office, which was a public professional setting, and I'd text her every 30 minutes to let her know I was safe and okay. James Brennan's office was on the entire top floor of one of the newest and most expensive buildings downtown, the kind of building you needed special elevator access to get to the upper floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of the entire city and the mountains in the distance.
Modern, expensive furniture and contemporary art on the walls that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Everything about the space screamed wealth and power and success and exclusivity. James himself was probably in his mid-40s, tall and fit with graying hair at the temples, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that definitely cost several $1,000s, with the kind of commanding presence that made you pay attention when he walked into a room. He greeted me warmly with a firm handshake and invited me to sit in his private office, which had even better views than the reception area. Miss Harper, thank you so much for coming this evening. I know this entire situation must seem very strange and probably concerning, but I want to assure you that my intentions are purely to help you stay safe during a dangerous time in your life. He explained over dinner that was catered from an expensive restaurant I'd never been to, that his younger sister Emma had been killed by her abusive ex-boyfriend 15 years earlier, when James was just starting his business career. It was a domestic violence situation that had escalated to murder despite restraining orders and police involvement and multiple reports to authorities. Since then, James had made it essentially his personal mission to help other women in similar dangerous situations, using his considerable wealth and resources and connections to provide protection and security that the legal system often failed to provide adequately. Your case reminded me very strongly of my sister Emma's situation, James said, with what seemed like genuine emotion in his voice. A violent, controlling ex-boyfriend, escalating threats and violence, a restraining order that's really just a piece of paper. I can't stand by and watch another woman be hurt or killed when I have the means and the resources to prevent it from happening. It's an incredibly generous offer, but I have to be honest that I'm not comfortable accepting that level of help from someone I don't know, I said carefully. I can take care of myself. I've been taking care of myself my whole life. No one can fully protect themselves from a determined, violent person who wants to hurt them, James said firmly. That's just the reality of these situations. But I have resources and experience and professional security personnel that can significantly increase your safety and your chances of getting through this without being harmed. Please let me help you, just for a few months until your ex gets the message and moves on, or until he violates the restraining order in a way that gets him arrested and put in jail where he can't hurt you. His story about his sister Emma was compelling and emotionally manipulative, and his offer of help seemed genuinely well-intentioned on the surface. And honestly, I was terrified of Tyler and what he might do, and the idea of having professional security watching out for me was appealing, even though accepting this level of help from a complete stranger felt fundamentally wrong and made me deeply uncomfortable. So, after thinking about it for several days and talking it through with Lauren, who remained skeptical, I agreed to let Marcus provide security for me on what I insisted had to be a temporary basis, while I got the restraining order in place and figured out my next steps. That decision was my first serious mistake in this whole situation. The security started out seeming reasonable and appropriate for the circumstances. Marcus would follow me at a discreet distance when I went out to meetings or to run errands or to meet with sources for my journalism work, making sure no one was following me or approaching me in a threatening way. He'd do a thorough security sweep of Lauren's apartment building each night before I went home to make sure Tyler wasn't lurking around waiting for me. He'd check in once a day via text to get my general schedule and plan his security coverage accordingly. It felt somewhat intrusive to have someone monitoring my movements, but it also felt reassuring to know that a trained professional was watching out for potential danger.
But within just 1 week of this arrangement starting, the reasonable, appropriate security had already escalated into something much more invasive and controlling in ways that made me increasingly uncomfortable. James started wanting me to check in with him personally twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, to let him know I was safe and to discuss my plans. He wanted increasingly detailed information about my schedule and my activities, where I was going and when and with whom and why and for how long. He had strong opinions about which places were safe for me to go and which weren't, suggesting or really insisting that I avoid certain neighborhoods or establishments or situations that he deemed too risky given Tyler's potential threat level. When I pushed back and said this level of oversight felt like too much and was making me uncomfortable, James would immediately remind me of his sister Emma and of the very real danger I was facing from Tyler. "I'm just trying to keep you alive, Sophie."
Your ex is a dangerous, violent person who has explicitly threatened you. If you're not willing to follow basic, reasonable security protocols and recommendations, then I can't effectively help you, and I can't be responsible for what happens. The guilt trip was incredibly effective at shutting down my objections. I didn't want to seem ungrateful or foolish or cavalier about my own safety when someone was offering me help that he didn't have to provide. So I went along with the increasing demands and restrictions, even though something about the whole situation felt more and more wrong with each passing day. About 3 weeks into this security arrangement that had started to feel less like protection and more like something else I couldn't quite name yet, I started noticing that Marcus wasn't just providing security and protection like a normal bodyguard would. He was systematically and meticulously reporting everything I did and everywhere I went and everyone I talked to, and even what I said in supposedly private conversations, back to James in what must have been incredibly detailed reports. I discovered this disturbing fact when James casually mentioned during one of our mandatory twice-daily check-in phone calls something very specific from a private conversation I'd had with Lauren in her apartment the night before, a conversation about my concerns about the security arrangement itself and whether it was becoming too intrusive. The conversation had taken place in Lauren's living room with the doors and windows closed and no one else present, and yet James referenced a specific phrase I'd used, word for word, that only someone who had been actively listening to that conversation in real time could possibly have known about. "Are you having Marcus monitor and record my private conversations?" I asked James directly during that phone call, my voice sharp with anger and violation. "Are you actually listening to what I say when I think I'm having private discussions with my friends in their homes? I need to know the truth right now. I'm having Marcus ensure your complete and comprehensive safety in every possible way, which necessarily and unavoidably includes being constantly aware of any potential threats or concerning situations that might arise in your environment," James said in that smooth, practiced way he had of not directly answering uncomfortable questions. "If your ex, Tyler, tries to contact you directly or indirectly through intermediaries, or if anyone approaches you who might be working for him or gathering information for him or trying to manipulate you on his behalf, I need to know about those contacts immediately so we can assess the threat level and respond appropriately to keep you safe." "That's not what I asked you, and you know it," I said, my voice getting harder and angrier. "Is Marcus listening to and recording my private conversations with my friends? Yes or no? It's a simple question that deserves a direct answer." James's tone turned noticeably colder and more distant, and subtly threatening in a way I was starting to recognize. "If you're not comfortable with the comprehensive level of protection I'm providing to you free of charge, you're completely free to dismiss Marcus at any time and handle your security situation entirely on your own, with whatever limited resources you have. But please don't come crying to me or blaming me when your violent ex-boyfriend Tyler shows up at your door and hurts you badly or rapes you or kills you because you were too proud or too stubborn or too paranoid to accept the professional help and protection I'm offering you out of genuine concern for your safety."
The manipulation in that statement was obvious once I paid attention to it, but it was also incredibly effective at making me question whether I was being unreasonable. I should have ended the entire arrangement right there in that exact moment. I should have told James clearly and firmly to call off his security personnel immediately and to stop monitoring me and to leave me alone so I could handle my situation on my own, or through official, legitimate channels, or through actual professional domestic violence resources that respected boundaries. But I was genuinely deeply scared of Tyler and what he might do if he found me, and James had very successfully convinced me over the past 3 weeks, through constant repetition and subtle pressure, that I couldn't possibly stay safe without his protection, and his resources, and his professional security personnel watching over me constantly. So I stayed in the arrangement that was becoming increasingly controlling and invasive and wrong with each day that passed, each day making it harder to imagine leaving. The restraining order hearing finally came 2 weeks after that disturbing phone call, and I went to court with my lawyer to present my case. The judge carefully reviewed all the evidence I'd submitted, the photos of bruises from multiple incidents, the threatening text messages I'd saved and printed out, my detailed written testimony about the pattern of escalating abuse over our 2-year relationship, character witness statements from friends who'd seen the abuse or its effects.
The judge asked me questions about specific incidents and about why I'd stayed as long as I did and what made me finally decide to leave. Then the judge reviewed Tyler's response to the petition, which was basically a denial that he'd ever been abusive and a claim that I was making everything up because I was angry about our breakup. After considering everything, the judge granted a temporary restraining order against Tyler that was good for 6 months, with a mandatory review hearing scheduled after that period to determine if it should be extended. The order was very specific and clear. Tyler had to stay at least 500 feet away from me at all times with no exceptions. He couldn't contact me directly or indirectly through any means, including phone, text, email, social media, letter, or through other people acting as intermediaries. He couldn't come to my home or my workplace, or my friends' homes, or any place he had reason to believe I might be. Violation of any part of the order could result in immediate arrest and criminal charges, including up to 1 year in jail. It should have made me feel significantly safer, knowing there was now a legal order in place with real consequences if Tyler violated it. But Tyler had never been someone who respected rules or legal boundaries or other people's rights or authority. The day immediately after the restraining order was officially served on Tyler by police officers at his workplace, making it absolutely clear he knew about the order and its terms, Tyler started aggressively trying to contact me through every possible means he could think of. Text messages from new phone numbers he'd gotten specifically to get around my blocking him. Messages that Marcus's sophisticated monitoring systems caught immediately and documented. Multiple drive-by passes near Lauren's apartment building in his distinctive red pickup truck, passes that the security cameras James had installed in the area captured on video with clear timestamps. Messages sent through mutual acquaintances we had from before we started dating, people who didn't know about the abuse, asking them to please tell me he just wanted to talk and work things out. Each single incident was immediately reported to the police and carefully documented with photos and videos and written descriptions, but Tyler was being calculated and smart about how he was probing the boundaries. He wasn't quite crossing the clear legal line into violating the restraining order in ways that would absolutely guarantee his arrest and prosecution. He was testing where the boundaries actually were, seeing what he could get away with, making absolutely sure I knew he was still out there and still watching me and still very interested in me despite the court order. James used each and every single one of Tyler's attempts at contact as complete justification for dramatically and immediately increasing the security measures around me, adding more restrictions and more monitoring and more control over my movements and my life. "We need to move you to a much more secure location immediately," he said firmly, after Tyler was spotted near Lauren's neighborhood for the 3rd time in 1 week. "Lauren's apartment building isn't safe for you anymore, now that he clearly knows exactly where you're staying and has been surveilling the area.
I have a property that's much more secure, a private guest house on my personal estate with proper security gates and comprehensive surveillance systems and trained security personnel on site 24 hours a day. You'll be completely safe there, and we can control who has access to you." "No," I said as firmly as I could manage, trying desperately to maintain some kind of boundary and some sense of control over my own life. "I'm not moving into your property. That's way too much involvement. That crosses a major line from you helping me with security to you controlling my entire life and where I live." "Sophie, I need you to understand the reality of your situation," James said, with that tone of forced patience that made it clear he thought I was being stupid. "Your ex-boyfriend Tyler knows exactly where you're living right now. He's driven by the building multiple times in the last week. We have video evidence of this. It's only a matter of time, maybe days, before he decides to confront you there, or to break into the building, or to do something even worse. I'm offering you a completely safe place to stay until this dangerous situation fully resolves one way or another. Why would you possibly refuse that kind of comprehensive protection? What possible reason could you have besides irrational pride? Because it feels fundamentally wrong to be that level of dependent on you," I said as honestly as I could, trying to articulate the deep discomfort I felt, even though I couldn't fully explain it yet. "Because moving into your property crosses a serious line from professional security services into something else entirely, something that makes me very uncomfortable, even though I can't fully explain why. I'm trying to save your actual life here," James said, his voice turning hard and cold and angry in a way I hadn't heard it before.
"But if you'd rather risk being attacked or raped or murdered because you're worried about what accepting help looks like or what people might think about you living on my property, that's ultimately your choice to make as an adult. But make that choice consciously and with full understanding of the probable consequences. Don't come crying to me later when something terrible happens that could have been prevented." The emotional manipulation was completely obvious to me when I looked at it objectively, but it was also incredibly effective because my fear of Tyler was very real and based on actual experience of his violence. And the truth was that I was terrified of him finding me and hurting me badly, and James was offering a level of safety and security that I desperately wanted and felt like I needed. So once again, despite every single instinct I had telling me this was wrong and dangerous in its own way, I agreed to something I absolutely should not have agreed to. I moved into the guest house on James's massive private estate, and that's when the protection that was supposedly designed to keep me safe from Tyler transformed completely and obviously into captivity that controlled literally every single aspect of my existence. The guest house itself was actually very nice on the surface, comfortable and well-appointed with everything I might need, including a full kitchen and office space, and comfortable furniture. But it was located on James's massive private property behind multiple security gates, with his security personnel stationed everywhere. I couldn't come and go freely without Marcus or another security guard accompanying me and monitoring me. All of my movements were tracked in real time and reported. James expected me to have dinner with him at the main house several times every week and would get visibly upset and angry when I declined or tried to make excuses. He'd show up at the guest house completely unannounced at random times to check on me, letting himself in with his copy of the key despite my repeated requests that he at least call or text first before coming over. The security that was supposed to protect me from Tyler had become a completely different kind of prison that was just as confining and controlling. When I finally worked up the courage to tell James I wanted to move out, that I genuinely appreciated everything he'd done, but I needed to live independently and have my own space, his response was absolutely chilling and made me realize how trapped I actually was. "You can leave whenever you want to, Sophie. I'm not holding you here against your will, but if you leave my protection and something happens to you, something bad, that's entirely on you and your choices.
I've provided you with safety and security that you clearly can't provide for yourself or afford on a journalist's salary. Leaving my protection would be incredibly stupid and irresponsible. Also, you should know that I've been very carefully documenting all of Tyler's attempts to contact you and all of your various responses to those attempts. Some of those responses could potentially be interpreted as you violating the restraining order yourself by engaging with him. If you leave my protection, I might feel obligated to share all of that documentation with the authorities and with your lawyer. It was a direct threat, barely disguised as concern for my well-being. He was explicitly saying he would report me for restraining order violations that were either completely fabricated or taken wildly out of context if I tried to leave his property and his control. I was thoroughly trapped, not by Tyler anymore, but by the person who had claimed to be saving me from Tyler. I stayed in the guest house on James's estate for another 2 miserable months, feeling increasingly desperate and hopeless, and like I was losing my sense of self. James's oversight and control of my life intensified dramatically during this period. He wanted to personally approve who I spent time with, claiming he needed to properly vet people for security purposes and to make sure they weren't connected to Tyler. He criticized my journalism work constantly, saying I was taking unnecessary risks by pursuing certain stories and meeting with certain sources. He made detailed comments about my appearance and my habits and my daily routines, framing everything as being about my safety, but really being entirely about his desire to control every aspect of my life. I felt like I was losing myself completely, becoming smaller and more compliant, letting someone else make literally all my decisions because I was too scared and too manipulated to trust my own judgment anymore. The turning point finally came one afternoon when Lauren managed to visit me at the estate despite James's explicit standing instructions that I shouldn't have visitors without his prior written approval at least 24 hours in advance. Lauren had told the security guards at the main gate that she was my sister and that there was a serious family emergency involving our mother that she needed to discuss with me urgently and in person, and the guards let her through after calling James's office to confirm.
When Lauren actually saw how I was living, the way I was essentially under house arrest by someone who claimed to be protecting me, when she saw how much weight I'd lost and how anxious and jumpy I was and how defeated I seemed, she was absolutely furious in a way I'd never seen her before. "Sophie, this is completely insane," Lauren said, her voice shaking with anger and concern. "You're not safe here in any meaningful sense. You're being held captive here. This guy James isn't actually helping you or protecting you from Tyler. He's controlling and manipulating you in exactly the same way Tyler did, but with more money and more sophisticated methods and a better cover story. You need to leave immediately, like today, right now if possible." "I can't just leave," I said, my voice defeated and hopeless as I explained James's explicit threat about reporting me to authorities for fabricated restraining order violations using his supposed documentation. "He has recordings and transcripts and security camera footage, and he's made it very clear he'll use all of it against me if I try to leave his property. I'll be arrested for violating my own restraining order against Tyler." "Yes, you can leave," Lauren said firmly, grabbing both my hands and looking me directly in the eyes, "because he's completely bluffing and trying to scare you into compliance and control. And even if he's not bluffing about having documentation, you haven't actually violated the restraining order in any meaningful way. Tyler was consistently initiating unwanted contact, and you were trying repeatedly to get him to stop and leave you alone. The police and the courts will clearly and obviously see that you're the victim here, not the violator. James doesn't have the actual power over you that he desperately wants you to believe he has. He's lying and manipulating you to keep you trapped here under his control." That conversation with Lauren was like finally waking up from a long, terrible, suffocating nightmare that had seemed endless. I suddenly saw with complete crystal clarity how James had systematically and deliberately manipulated me into total dependence over these months, using my legitimate and reasonable fear of Tyler as the primary tool to gain control over me. He'd positioned himself as my savior and my only possible source of safety, when really he was just another kind of abuser, just another controller who saw me as something to own and manage and dominate rather than as an independent person worthy of respect and autonomy and the right to make my own choices. I decided right there, in that moment with Lauren, that I would leave the very next day while James was traveling out of state for business meetings he'd mentioned. I spent that night quietly and carefully packing all my belongings into bags, trying not to alert Marcus or the other security personnel who I knew were monitoring the guest house through cameras and other surveillance. I called a taxi company and arranged for a pickup at the estate gates at 10 a.m. the next morning, when I knew James would be gone and Marcus would be distracted with his morning security briefing. Then I walked out carrying my bags, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode, expecting at any moment for someone to physically stop me. James's security personnel, including Marcus, did try to stop me at first when they realized I was leaving with all my belongings. Marcus literally stood in front of my path and said, "Ms. Harper, Mr. Brennan hasn't authorized you to leave the property today. I need you to return to the guest house until we can contact him and get approval for this departure." I looked Marcus directly in the eyes and said as clearly and firmly as I could manage, despite my fear, "I'm leaving voluntarily as a free adult person. I'm not under arrest and you are not law enforcement. You cannot legally prevent me from leaving or physically detain me against my will. If you try to stop me or touch me, that's unlawful imprisonment and I will immediately call 911 and report it. Move aside." For a long, tense moment, Marcus just stared at me, and I genuinely wasn't sure if he would let me pass or if he would physically restrain me anyway. But then he stepped aside and let me walk past him to the gate. I went directly back to Lauren's apartment where I felt safe with someone who actually cared about me and wasn't trying to control me, and I immediately filed a detailed, comprehensive police report about James's controlling behavior and his explicit threats, and the involuntary confinement and the extensive surveillance. The officer who took my report seemed skeptical at first about whether any actual crimes had been committed, but as I laid out the full timeline and provided evidence of James's threats and the monitoring, his expression changed. The officer helped me document everything properly and advised me to consult with a domestic violence advocate and possibly a lawyer. James tried to contact me repeatedly and persistently after I left his property, calling my phone dozens of times and sending long, rambling text messages, and even physically showing up at Lauren's apartment building multiple times, demanding loudly to see me.
Each time he showed up, Lauren would call the police, and each time the police would tell him he needed to leave the property. I documented every single contact attempt meticulously, with dates and times and screenshots and photos, and reported all of it to the police to build a comprehensive record. Eventually, after consulting with a lawyer named Diana Torres, who specialized in domestic violence cases and had seen situations like mine before, I filed for a restraining order against James himself. The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone involved, that the wealthy, powerful person who'd assigned me protection because of my dangerous ex-boyfriend was now someone I needed legal protection from. The hearing for my restraining order against James Brennan was absolutely surreal, and in some ways more difficult than the hearing for the order against Tyler had been. James showed up with two very expensive lawyers in suits that probably cost $5,000 each, and they argued eloquently that he'd only been trying to help me out of the goodness of his heart because of his tragic history with his sister, that I was being ungrateful and vindictive and possibly mentally unstable. They painted a picture of James as a generous philanthropist trying to save a damsel in distress who was now turning on him for no good reason. My lawyer, Diana, presented extensive evidence to counter that narrative. She showed the judge texts and emails where James made controlling demands. She presented testimony from Lauren about the conditions I'd been living under on his estate. She showed proof of the surveillance equipment and the monitoring of my movements and conversations. She played audio recordings I'd made on my phone of some of our later conversations, where James made thinly veiled threats about the supposed documentation of restraining order violations. Most compellingly, she presented evidence that Tyler had largely given up trying to contact me months ago, which completely undermined James's justification that I still needed his protection. The judge reviewed everything very carefully over the course of a full-day hearing, asking detailed questions of both sides and reviewing all the evidence presented. Then the judge granted a temporary restraining order against James Brennan for 6 months, explicitly noting in the ruling that the evidence suggested a pattern of controlling behavior that justified protection. The order specified that James had to stay 500 feet away from me, couldn't contact me directly or indirectly, couldn't come to my home or workplace. A full hearing was scheduled for 6 months later to determine if the order should be made permanent. Tyler, meanwhile, had mostly given up trying to contact me months earlier, probably sometime around when I moved onto James's estate. The restraining order and the consistent threat of actual arrest seemed to have finally convinced him to move on with his life and pursue other relationships and leave me alone. The real danger to my safety and my autonomy had never been as extreme or as imminent as James had made it seem to justify his control. He'd deliberately exaggerated the threat level and used my legitimate fear to gain power over me. Now, almost a full year after finally escaping from James's supposed protection that had become captivity, I'm very slowly and carefully rebuilding my life entirely on my own terms, without anyone controlling or monitoring or managing me. The recovery process has been long and difficult and ongoing. I found a new apartment in a completely different part of the city that neither Tyler nor James knows the location of, being extremely careful about not posting the address anywhere online or telling anyone except my closest trusted friends and family where I actually live. I work with a reputable, legitimate security consultant now, a woman named Rebecca who comes highly recommended by domestic violence advocates, and she's helping me implement reasonable, practical safety measures like good locks and a security system and awareness of my surroundings, but without any surveillance or control or invasion of my privacy. I check in with her once a month to review whether I'm still taking appropriate precautions, given that both restraining orders are still in effect, but she respects my autonomy and my right to make my own decisions about my own life. I'm in intensive therapy twice a week with a psychologist who specializes in trauma from intimate partner abuse, and we're working on processing both the obviously abusive relationship with Tyler and the more subtle but equally damaging trauma of what James did to me under the false guise of protection and concern. My therapist, Dr. Maria Santos, has been helping me understand the psychological dynamics of what happened, how James exploited a moment of crisis and vulnerability to insert himself into my life, how he used my legitimate fear to manipulate me into accepting increasing levels of control, how the situation paralleled abusive relationships in almost every way except it was disguised as help and safety rather than being obviously harmful.
What I learned through this terrible experience that consumed months of my life is that abuse and control and manipulation come in many different forms and packages, and that people who present themselves as saviors or protectors or helpers or rescuers can sometimes be just as dangerous as the obvious threats you can see coming from a distance. James deliberately used my vulnerability and my legitimate fear of Tyler to insert himself into my life and gain complete control over me. He systematically exploited my real, genuine need for safety to justify surveillance and manipulation and restriction of my freedom and autonomy.
He made himself seem absolutely indispensable and irreplaceable, and then used that manufactured dependence to explicitly threaten me when I tried to assert independence or leave his control. The warning signs I desperately wish I'd recognized much earlier in this process are things that everyone should watch for carefully in their own lives and relationships. Someone who inserts themselves into your crisis or your dangerous situation without a clear, direct invitation from you. Someone who escalates their involvement in your life very quickly and dramatically beyond what's appropriate or reasonable for the level of relationship you actually have. Someone who wants detailed, comprehensive oversight and control of your life, supposedly justified by concern for your safety or well-being. Someone who gets angry or threatening or manipulative when you try to set even basic boundaries or assert even minimal independence. Someone who consistently and deliberately uses fear to make you compliant with their demands and restrictions. Someone who positions themselves as your only legitimate source of safety or support and actively works to isolate you from other resources and relationships. If you're in a situation right now where someone is offering help that comes with extensive strings attached, where protection feels more like prison than actual safety, where concern has morphed into control, please know that you can leave. You absolutely can extract yourself from that situation. You don't owe anyone gratitude or compliance or obedience for help that costs you your autonomy and your freedom and your sense of self. Real, genuine help respects your agency and your fundamental right as an adult to make your own choices about your own life, even if those choices involve some risk. Real protection doesn't require constant, comprehensive surveillance or enforced isolation or complete dependence on one single person. There are legitimate professional resources available for people escaping domestic violence, including shelters and victim advocates and legal services and counseling that provide real, effective help without taking over your entire life or demanding control in exchange. Seek out those established professional resources instead of accepting offers from wealthy individuals, however well-connected or well-intentioned they claim to be, who want to be your personal savior and protector. The National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 can connect you with local resources and help you make a safety plan. They're available 24 hours a day, and they understand these complex situations. She told the security guards at the main gate that she was my sister and that there was a family emergency she needed to discuss with me urgently, and they let her through to see me. When Lauren saw how I was actually living, essentially under house arrest by someone who claimed to be protecting me, she was absolutely furious. "Sophie, this is completely insane," Lauren said, her voice shaking with anger. "You're not safe here. You're being held captive here. This guy James isn't helping you or protecting you. He's controlling you in exactly the same way Tyler did, but with more money and more sophisticated methods. You need to leave immediately." "I can't leave," I said, my voice defeated as I explained James' threat about reporting me to authorities for fabricated restraining order violations. "He has documentation and recordings, and he'll use them against me if I try to leave." "Yes, you can leave," Lauren said firmly, "because he's completely bluffing and trying to scare you into compliance. And even if he's not bluffing, you haven't actually violated the restraining order in any way. The police and the courts will clearly see that Tyler was consistently initiating contact, and you were trying to get him to stop and leave you alone. James doesn't have the power over you that he wants you to believe he has. He's lying to keep you trapped." That conversation with Lauren was like finally waking up from a long, terrible nightmare. I suddenly saw with complete clarity how James had systematically manipulated me into total dependence, using my legitimate and reasonable fear of Tyler as the primary tool to control me. He'd positioned himself as my savior and my only source of safety, when really he was just another controller who saw me as something to own and manage, rather than as a person worthy of respect and autonomy. I decided to leave the very next day while James was traveling for business meetings in another state.
I packed all my belongings quietly, called a taxi to pick me up at the estate gates, and I walked out. James's security personnel tried to physically stop me at first, but I told them very clearly that I was leaving voluntarily and they couldn't legally prevent me from leaving or detain me. I went directly back to Lauren's apartment where I felt safe and immediately filed a detailed police report about James's controlling behavior and threats, and the involuntary confinement. James tried to contact me repeatedly after I left his property, calling dozens of times and sending long text messages, and even showing up at Lauren's apartment building demanding to see me. I documented every single contact attempt and reported all of it to the police. Eventually, after consulting with a lawyer who specialized in domestic violence cases, I filed for a restraining order against James himself. The irony was not lost on anyone that the person who'd assigned me protection was now someone I needed legal protection from. The hearing for my restraining order against James Brennan was absolutely surreal. His expensive lawyers argued that he'd only been trying to help me out of the goodness of his heart, and that I was being ungrateful and vindictive. My lawyer presented extensive evidence of his controlling behavior and explicit threats, and the excessive surveillance and the involuntary confinement. The judge reviewed everything carefully and granted a temporary order, then scheduled a full hearing to determine if it should be made permanent. Tyler, meanwhile, had mostly given up trying to contact me after the first few months. The restraining order and the consistent threat of arrest seemed to have finally convinced him to move on with his life and leave me alone. The real danger to me had never been as extreme or as imminent as James had made it seem. He'd exaggerated the threat and used my fear to gain control over me. Now, almost a year after finally escaping from James's supposed protection, I'm slowly rebuilding my life on completely my own terms. I found a new apartment in a different part of the city that neither Tyler nor James knows the location of. I work with a reputable security consultant who's helping me implement reasonable safety measures without any surveillance or control. I'm in therapy twice a week, processing both the abusive relationship with Tyler and the trauma of what James did to me under the guise of protection. What I learned through this terrible experience is that abuse and control come in many different forms, and that people who present themselves as saviors or protectors or helpers can be just as dangerous as the obvious threats you can see coming. James used my vulnerability and my legitimate fear to insert himself into my life and gain complete control over me. He exploited my real need for safety to justify surveillance and manipulation and restriction of my freedom. He made himself seem indispensable and then used that manufactured dependence to threaten me when I tried to leave. The warning signs I desperately wish I'd recognized earlier are things everyone should watch for. Someone who inserts themselves into your crisis or your dangerous situation without a clear invitation. Someone who escalates their involvement in your life very quickly beyond what's appropriate or reasonable. Someone who wants detailed oversight and control of your life, supposedly justified by concern for your safety. Someone who gets angry or threatened when you try to set boundaries or assert any independence. Someone who consistently uses fear to make you compliant with their demands. Someone who positions themselves as your only legitimate source of safety or support and tries to isolate you from other resources. If you're in a situation where someone is offering help that comes with extensive strings attached, where protection feels more like prison than safety, where concern has become control, please know that you can leave. You don't owe anyone gratitude or compliance for help that costs you your autonomy and your freedom. Real help respects your agency and your fundamental right to make your own choices about your own life.
Real protection doesn't require constant surveillance or isolation or complete dependence on one person. There are legitimate professional resources for people escaping domestic violence, including shelters and victim advocates and legal services that provide real help without taking over your entire life. Seek out those established resources instead of accepting offers from wealthy individuals, however well-connected, who want to be your personal savior and protector. If this story resonates with your own experience in any meaningful way, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. Have you dealt with someone who used protection or help or generosity or rescue as a cover for control and manipulation? How did you first recognize what was actually happening versus what they claimed was happening? How did you manage to get out safely? Your story and your experience might genuinely help someone else who's currently struggling with a similar situation and doesn't know how to name what they're experiencing, or doesn't feel like anyone would believe them. I've learned so much through this painful experience about the nature of control and abuse and how they manifest in ways that aren't always obvious on the surface. James Brennan presented himself as everything Tyler wasn't. Where Tyler was obviously volatile and violent and threatening, James was calm and collected and protective. Where Tyler isolated me through intimidation and jealousy, James isolated me through supposed concern for my safety. Where Tyler controlled me through fear of what he would do to me, James controlled me through fear of what Tyler would do to me if I didn't comply with James's demands. But both of them saw me as something to own, rather than as an independent person deserving of respect and autonomy. Both of them used fear as their primary tool for maintaining control over my choices and my movements and my life. Both of them escalated their control gradually, so I didn't fully recognize what was happening until I was thoroughly trapped. Both of them threatened me when I tried to leave. The methods were different, but the underlying dynamic of control and domination was identical. What makes situations like the one with James particularly insidious and difficult to recognize and escape from is that they're wrapped in the language of care and concern and protection. When someone is explicitly hitting you or screaming at you or threatening you, like Tyler did, it's easier to identify as abuse, even if it's still hard to leave. But when someone is ostensibly keeping you safe, when they're spending money to protect you, when they're framing every restriction as being for your own good, it becomes much harder to trust your instincts that something is wrong. You question yourself constantly. Maybe I'm being ungrateful. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe I'm not seeing clearly because of the trauma from Tyler. Maybe James really does have my best interests at heart, and I should trust his judgment more than my own. Those thoughts went through my mind hundreds of times during those months on his estate, and they kept me compliant and trapped longer than I should have stayed. Another thing that made the situation particularly difficult was the power differential. James was wealthy and connected in ways I could never match. He had resources I couldn't access. He had relationships with law enforcement that I didn't have. When he made threats about reporting me or having me arrested, I believed he could follow through on those threats because he had power I didn't have. That power imbalance is something abusers often exploit, whether it's financial power or social power or physical power. They use the differential to make you believe you can't challenge them or leave them or survive without them. For me, rebuilding has meant not just establishing physical safety, but also rebuilding my sense of self and my trust in my own judgment and my belief that I'm capable of taking care of myself without someone controlling me. The therapy has been essential for this process.
Dr. Santos has helped me work through the shame I felt about allowing this situation to happen, about accepting James's help in the first place, about staying as long as I did. She's helped me understand that I made the best decisions I could with the information and resources I had at each point, and that James was skilled at manipulation in ways that would have fooled many people. I've also had to rebuild my professional life and reputation. During those months on James's estate, my journalism work suffered significantly. I missed deadlines because James's restrictions made it impossible to do my job properly. I lost sources because James's security presence made people uncomfortable talking to me. I damaged relationships with editors because I couldn't explain what was happening without it sounding completely insane. After I left, I had to slowly rebuild those professional relationships, explaining carefully what had happened and why my work had been so inconsistent. Most people in my professional network have been understanding once they heard the full story, but it took time and effort to regain the trust and the opportunities I'd lost. Financially, the situation also set me back in ways I'm still recovering from. While I was on James's estate, I wasn't paying rent, which seemed like a benefit at the time, but which I now see was part of the trap. When I left, I had to find a new apartment quickly, which meant paying first month and last month and security deposit all at once. I had to replace items I'd left behind when I fled. I had therapy costs that my insurance only partially covered. I had legal fees from fighting for the restraining order against James. The financial impact of those months will affect me for years, but I'm managing and I'm rebuilding and I'm making progress. I've also had to rebuild my personal relationships that suffered during that time. I'd pulled away from friends because James made it so difficult to maintain those connections. My family had been worried about me, but I'd been reassuring them everything was fine because I believed James's narrative that he was keeping me safe. After I escaped, I had to have difficult conversations with people I cared about, explaining what had happened and apologizing for disappearing from their lives. Most people have been supportive and understanding, but some relationships were damaged in ways that may never fully heal. My relationship with men and dating has obviously been profoundly affected by these experiences, with both Tyler and James. How do you trust someone new when your last two significant male relationships were both abusive in different ways? How do you open yourself up to connection when connection has repeatedly led to control? These are questions I'm still working through in therapy and in my daily life. I'm not actively dating right now, focusing instead on rebuilding my independence and my sense of self. Maybe someday I'll be ready to try again, but for now, I'm content with being alone and autonomous and free. What I want people to understand from my story is that abuse doesn't always look like what we think it looks like. It doesn't always involve physical violence or obvious threats. Sometimes it looks like concern and care and protection. Sometimes it comes from people who seem respectable and successful and well-intentioned. Sometimes it's disguised so well that even the victim has trouble recognizing it for what it is. If something feels wrong in your gut, if someone's help feels like control, if protection feels like prison, trust that instinct, even if you can't fully articulate why. Your discomfort is information. Your unease is a signal. Don't let someone else convince you that your perception of your own experience is wrong. I also want people to understand that it's never too late to leave. I stayed with Tyler for 2 years. I stayed in James's supposed protection for months. I wasted time I can't get back. But when I finally left, when I finally trusted myself enough to walk away despite the fears and the threats and the manipulation, I survived. Life after abuse is possible. Recovery is possible. Rebuilding is possible. It's not easy and it's not quick and it's not linear, but it's absolutely achievable. Almost a year out now, I can see how far I've come, even though I can also see how much work is still ahead of me. I have my own place that I pay for with money I earn. I have a career that's mine and not controlled by someone else's restrictions. I have friendships that are genuine and reciprocal and not monitored or managed. I have autonomy over my schedule and my movements and my choices. These things that used to seem so basic and ordinary now feel precious and hard-won. I don't take my freedom for granted anymore.
Every day that I wake up and make my own decisions about what to do and where to go and who to see feels like a gift. Every interaction that isn't reported to someone else feels liberating. Every choice I make without having to justify it or get approval feels empowering. This is what recovery looks like for me. This slow, steady reclaiming of myself and my life from people who tried to own me. Thank you for listening to my story. Please consider supporting the channel if these stories are meaningful to you. You can find more stories about relationships and control on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next one.